What if nothing is the way it seems? What if we walk and walk until our feet get tired and still have no answers? What if the stories we hear don't match the stories we live? I know a story about a little boy who got cowboy boots for Christmas. Red cowboy boots, which he adored and wore to bed every night. His sister, with whom he shared a room, did not receive cowboy boots for Christmas, but a cowgirl skirt, brown and white cowhide with fringe. The little boy loved his boots, but he coveted the skirt, longed to feel its fringe slap against his naked thighs as he twirled and twirled, which horrified and provoked his parents. "Why can't I wear it?" he asked. "She barely uses it, and certainly doesn't understand the nuance of how to let it drape and swing."
Art making, for me, started out very much as a survival technique. I didn't have a very strong tether to kind of the real world, and felt a little bit like I was on the outside with my nose pressing against the glass, looking at the people who were real, who had real lives and who were participating, and I was kind of this observer. Making art and pouring myself into it was a way of being in the world, a way of understanding the world, a way of creating something that had roots that tied me to the world. So it wasn't so much that I sat at home one day and said, "Gee, I think I'll make some art." It was more that I needed to do it because of this need to understand the world through some kind of action. So for me, that's what it's always been and what it continues to be. 1980 was probably the time when, for me, when I really started taking the risks that I'd been wanting to take for a long time, but of combining materials. So I kind of dragged it all into the studio, the writing and the acting and the singing and the theater, and a desire to make a very personal statement about who I was, about how I saw the world. Not abstractly, but directly. This is it. And that compulsion, or that need, turned into this hybridized art form, which I call dance theater.
If you gesticulate too much, if you are excited by too much, if you enjoy the aesthetic of too much.
In the beginning, I produced mostly solo works that were very kind of personal essays about, here I am in the middle of my life, how did I get here, what does it mean? What does it mean to be gay in America? What does it mean to be, too sensitive to be in a man's body, according to the definitions that we've all learned? What does it mean to be dreaming all the time and not strongly tethered to reality? And much to my dismay and delight, a lot of people whether they were exactly like me or not, could relate to these issues and could feel what I was feeling and could take the ride with me. And I got to develop my work and watch it grow and bring other people into it and collaborate with some of the great artists that live here. And that was when I formed the company.
Why do you need to act it out so much? Why do you need to say, am I? Am I a man? I'm so
I really think in a collaborative process, what the director does is creates an environment that is safe and jovial and interactive, and where conversations can happen, where people can tell the truth, where they can take risks, where they can reveal themselves, and also where they can have, fun, because fun is another part of the process, and it reveals a certain kind of work that nothing else can get to, except having fun, except playing. So yeah, I think it's absolutely important to get those people to make an investment, to get them to take responsibility, to get them to feel ownership, to get them to feel like they are in charge of something. And I can only do that by inviting them into an environment where they're loved and they can play. And that's probably the most important thing that I do. It works when the artists who work for you have a great respect for your ideas and are willing to go with you when you feel passionate about something. But I think that really only happens when it's a two-way street, when you can also respond to their passions and let them have a voice. And that's the way that I like to work. I found the solos, although they were pretty successful for me, so lonely. It was, my whole reason for coming to this is that I wanted a dialogue and a conversation. And certainly as a solo artist, you can have a conversation with an audience, but you don't really know those people, and then they go away. It's nice to have an ongoing conversation with an ensemble, where we really do know each other, and it really lasts over time, and it develops, and it gets deeper and deeper. That to me is the real pleasure.
It's more size. Okay. Come and get on my magic carpet and we're gonna go. Yee!
I guess primarily the thing that we all share is a hunger for movement. I like very animal movers, people who are kind of innate movers and who move with a lot of depth in the body and a lot of kind of passion and fearlessness. That probably is a bottom line thing that I think we all have, that we share. But I'm going to spend inordinate amounts of time with these people, and it's really important to me that they be people that I can converse with and have a conversation with, and that we can build on ideas together. So it's an alert mind and a kind of a willing spirit. Those are as important as any kind of hardcore skills they might bring. A creative, it's about mutual creativity. So someone has to be creative. They have to be willing to innovate and not to just interpret, and have some talent for that.
I pitied his wanting, his crushing, his pressing. So I let him turn off the car, rub his hand hard against my skirt. I opened my legs and let him press into me one more time. I closed my eyes, and one more time, I let him crush me and press.
When I'm creating a piece, I bring kind of an umbrella idea to the table. We're going to talk about out-of-body experience. We're going to talk about convenience. We're going to talk about cheap sex, whatever. You know, we have some umbrella idea. We all have, you know, as many of us as there are have that many different ideas about what that means. And we start with that kind of a discussion and start generating material around this very broad idea. But actually, truthfully, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's a residual idea from a piece we did 3 years ago that one of us doesn't feel done with yet and keeps saying, we never really did cheap sex. I want to go back to that one. And eventually I'll relent and, you know, we'll make our cheap sex piece. So it's not always, the idea doesn't always come from me necessarily. It comes from this pool, this reservoir of ideas that we've been building up over the years. And often we don't know where the idea came. You know, we couldn't trace it back to an original voice. It really comes kind of collectively. And I think that's as it should be. I really, especially the older I get, I take no pleasure in being the auteur, the sole kind of mastermind. Again, that's lonely and alienated, that position. It's much more fun to be in the mix and in the dialogue and facilitating it and getting to have the final word as a director and getting to shape it and move it out into the world. But I'm not interested in having my little, you know, hard nugget of a vision forced into the world. That's as painful as it sounds. I don't want to go there. So I basically think that for me, unlike a lot of dance artists, and you know, I think dance is probably my primary medium. A lot of dance artists work with different dancers. They're kind of interchangeable. They have these pickup companies and people come. I've worked with some of the same people for 15 years. You know, for me, it's about the depth of that pocket, of the understanding of each other and the particular skills of that artist, and developing those skills and actually building on what we've done before. There seem to be certain themes that emerge and emerge again and again, and that I keep coming back to, and gender is a big one. I just can remember so clearly growing up as a little boy and not understanding why I was so supposed to be and so different from my sisters, or why I was there were certain things that I felt in common with them that I wasn't supposed to feel in common with them, and I was a nurturer rather than a hunter or whatever, you know. And so gender and all the gender rules have always interested me, and that is certainly a consistent theme that comes through my work. Also the outsider, the person who feels inappropriate, who feels too big or too small for the situation, the context that he finds himself in. That sense of the monster with his nose pressed up against the glass, looking inside at the wonderful little hearth in the family, but feeling like, gee, I'm out here and I'm too big, I can't even get my head in the room. Or I'm too small, I'm Thumbelina underneath the table and no one can see me. That sense of being invisible in your own place and time, or being somehow outside, that's interesting to me. And I think we all feel it. Certainly there are, you know, certain cultural things that make us feel it. But I think we all feel it, no matter how perfect we might be, how Donna Reed we might look from the outside, we feel that. And I think that's an interesting thing. Expectations, and failed expectations. The expectations that we have for ourselves, the romantic. I mean, I grew up on Doris Day and Rock Hudson, and you know, because I was born in the 50s. And I really on some level still think that I'm going to have that kind of a relationship and we're going to live happily ever after. It's so embedded in my psyche at a very formative time, and I think there are a lot of strange romantic expectations that we have, and we, as adults, we get smart and we read and we get fluent in the ways of the world, and we laugh all of that off, but it's still there and still guiding us in some real primary way that we don't acknowledge. I think that's really interesting.
What does it mean to be a man? Do I have on the right costume? Maybe every day is different, and we never can decide. Should I stand like this? Or like this? Should I lean back like this? Or can I feel this more?
I think when I first started making art in San Francisco that talked about being gay and talked about who I was in a very truthful way, and then talked about AIDS a lot and how my experience of that was, living in an AIDS culture there for a while and still to many degrees, I really thought that people were going to be very hateful towards that and very frightened of it and very antagonistic towards it. That was not my experience. Even in Helena, Montana, and Boise, Idaho, and in the middle of the country, the places where I thought people hadn't experienced that, I mostly was wrong about that. And it was delightful for me to find out that we do all have human issues of life and death. And because I was talking about it in a very frank way, in a very human way, and with stories and with a sense of truth and reality, people were very receptive to it and found it very moving and weren't frightened by it or alienated by it. So that was a rich turning point for me when I realized that I could talk to all these different kinds of people. I'll tell you, my perfect vision of what happens after people come to see my work is that they go out talking about the things that have come up for them. Not walk out of the theater and say, that Joe Goode, he's awesome. Man, those jumps and those things and those whatever, and those sets and those lights, then they didn't really have the experience. But if they walk out talking about the ideas, talking about what they felt, talking about their relationship to the person they're with, and ideas and images are coming up for them, and they're really going into the interior space and looking at what they think they know about themselves in a new way, and then I've succeeded. And that's so I guess for me it's not a journey out, it's a journey in. And if I can get people to take that journey into themselves, then I've succeeded.
She's a code yellow.
What?
Think about it.
Bastard.
She's a little scared, and so she's hiding out in isolation.
There's too many darknesses out there. Too many chinks and voids where people used to be.
There's still people out there. Good people.
Yeah, good people on their way to somewhere else.
You just touch who you touch, Dottie. You don't get any lifetime guarantees.
my old eyes don't see too good. But I do see life changed me. How did that happen? Life is a delicate, fragile thing. It hardly thrives. It is always crumbling. Why didn't I spend the time better and be what I really wanted?
A piece of art, or making art, is making a marker, is saying that this is a moment in which I paid attention and I noticed that something was important, and I made a marker. Like I circled a passage in the book of life. Whether I painted my wall lime green, or whether I made the most gorgeous cake, or whether I pierced all of my nipples, I somehow made a marker about this moment, and that I was acknowledging the moment, I was paying attention and perceiving the moment. That's really all I think a piece of art is, and some of it is very ephemeral. I mean, some of my best art I think I do in the bathroom mirror, you know, in the morning. That doesn't make it any less important. So given that that's what I think making a piece of art is, the art itself has another function in the world, and I think that's the more powerful thing, that art is that thing which vibrates in the moment, that you do, or that I do, or that anybody does, or that happens accidentally sometimes with none of us making a conscious decision to make art. Sometimes there are artful moments that appear. And I think that vibration, that attention that got paid somehow in the moment, vibrates us and elevates us, and maybe more importantly, releases us from being who we are, who we think we are, the drudgery of who we think we are. And that's really the great thing. And I think the great thing about being an artist, identifying oneself in that way, is that I get to step outside of who I think I am on a daily basis. I get to pretend to be an energy, or a flower, or a piece of paper, you know. And I love that. I love spending that much time outside of myself. I mean, I think we're all artists. I really don't think of an artist as a specialized hothouse orchid, but we're just people who have, you know, have this appetite for making things, and I think most people have it, and some of us just can't get away from it, and so we end up becoming artists. I think the most important thing that I want to encourage people to do with my work, with my life, I like to often think that my life has a purpose, aside from just eating and shitting and getting older, is that we have the potential to go on this journey that's inside of us, that's in every person we talk to, that's in everything we dream about as we're looking out the window, and to value that journey. The art making, or the work that you do, or the money that you make is a happy kind of accident that occurs out of taking that journey. And it's not exactly the Hallmark card, dream your dream, that I'm talking about so much. Because I don't think it has to get articulated and calcified and this is my dream and I'm gonna pursue it. But to actually acknowledge everything that passes through and to take special moments, to take the time with those kind of moments when you're dreaming and say, this is an important thought that I'm having. So I'm gonna write it down, or I'm gonna take my two thumbs and stick them in paint and smush it on the wall or whatever, because the process of doing that is very rich and teaches you stuff about yourself and provides you with a window onto the world that you don't otherwise have. And because I think a lot of us are going through our lives checking off a to-do list, you know, which in a way was created for us. But it's also important to drift. And that the drifting, and when you turn the drifting into something that experiential, when you're really holding it in your hands and making it into something, that is some of the richest time you spend with yourself and some of the most productive.
What if nothing is the way it seems? What if we live with stories that bear no resemblance to the stories we've learned? What if we walk and walk and walk 1,000,000 miles and never arrive anywhere? What if there is no guide, no hero in a cape who presents himself and says, I will show you the way? What if the only way we'll get where we're going is to make our own stories? What if we walk and walk and walk, believing that we will get there?